We have I'd say a wide gamut. There is the WM Phoenix Open, which is kind of the pinnacle of sustainability in sports. It's the world's largest zero waste sporting event. They've been certified zero waste for 8 years now, which is awesome. And then we have some events who are in smaller markets where it's much harder to even, recycle or figure out what to recycle. So we're kind of at the whim of the local markets. Right now, I'm just trying to provide resources and support for our tournaments and help them move the ball forward.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Fiella, and welcome to another episode of the Golf Sustainability Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Brazos Barber, who's the Director of Sustainability for the PGA Tour. And I think you're going to be really interested in hearing about all of the things that they've had going on in the area of sustainability, which I don't think has received the notoriety or recognition that it deserves. So I think we're going to have a great conversation here today with Brazos. Brazos, welcome to the Golf Sustainability Podcast.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Really excited to be on.
Yeah, well, listen, let's jump right into it. And why don't we start by having you tell us about your personal career journey? How did you end up where you are now? And tell us a little about your current role.
Yeah, sure. I did not study sustainability or anything environmental related in school. I studied sports management at Florida State University. And after graduating, I kind of bounced around to a couple of different jobs. Eventually found my way to Jacksonville, Florida, and had some friends who were working at the PGA Tour. And they helped get me in the door through the interview at least. And anyway, long story short, my first job at the tour was in sales for a Korn Ferry Tour event. And then after that, I moved on to the Korn Ferry Tour Tournament Business Affairs team, which is kind of the liaison between our tournaments and the tour. And in the summer of 2019, the Open, or the British Open as it's referred to in the States sometimes, eliminated single-use plastic water bottles. And a number of our players went to the commissioner after the event and said, hey, what are we doing about this as the tour? Week to week and stateside. And so through some good luck and happenstance, I ended up on this task force that originally was just about single-use plastic water bottles. And that was kind of when the light bulb went off for me that there were other leagues and teams in the U.S. and even globally that were working on sustainability, had someone working on it full time. So yeah, I just kind of started taking over the task force, for lack of a better term. I started, just by taking the notes and putting together the agendas and stuff like that. And just started making it clear to everyone that I could that the PGA Tour needs someone to be thinking about and working on this full time, and that it should be me. So, like I said, I started in 2019 and then officially became the Director of Sustainability last year, April 1st of 2023. So.
That's great. So you were given this initial opportunity and you really ran with it.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said earlier, it was a lot of good luck to kind of be in the right place at the right time. But yeah, I saw the opportunity and I had the passion for it outside. This was things I was thinking about outside of work, climate change and protecting nature and that sort of thing, and not put the two together with sports and certainly not as a job for myself. So yeah, when I saw the opportunity, I did everything I could to take it. So
cool. Well, I understand in your current role, you oversee sustainability initiatives, not just with the tour events, but also at the TPC courses. Yeah. And before we get into talking about each of those individual elements, like how would you describe the overall philosophy of sustainability at the PGA Tour? Like give us a high level, and then we'll get into each of the two branches.
It's pretty clear that golf really, more than any other major sport, is affected by the climate, and it's our responsibility to do all that we can to protect it. And, we're an outdoor sport. Really, the game of golf was kind of formed by nature, right, in Scotland. And we don't have the luxury of artificial turf or retractable roofs. We're, exposed in across hundreds of acres. And there is a joke that a lot of people will have heard who run tournaments, that it always rains when the PGA Tour comes to town. And especially at the beginning of this year, we saw a lot of that, including in Phoenix, which, in the desert, which it's not supposed to rain in February in the desert. But anyway, so yeah, we're really working hard to do our best. We came up with a mission statement and 4 pillars that we released last year. And just real quick for the audience, our mission statement is that the PGA Tour will lead, partner, and inspire to take climate action and promote nature. And then we have our 4 kind of underlying pillars that support that mission statement, which are leadership and influence. So how can we use our platform as the PGA Tour to lead others and lead our other constituents to take action? Number 2 is climate action itself. So what can we be doing to reduce our impacts across emissions, waste, and water? Number 3 is purpose-driven partnerships. So how do we seek out, certainly, on the corporate side, partners who are looking to do the same types of things and can help us in our journey of sustainability. And then also same thing for vendors, the vendors that we're using for our tournaments and that we're purchasing things from, making sure that they are also kind of thinking about this and can help us move our sustainability initiatives along. And then the last one's promotion of nature, which kind of goes back to just where I started, how reliant we are. And I think a lot of the reason why a lot of recreational golfers especially enjoy the game is to be outside and to be amongst nature. So, here in Ponte Vedra, I see the most wildlife by far when I'm playing TPC Sawgrass. So we have this unique opportunity to promote nature and biodiversity and wildlife with our courses.
Very cool. Well, that's a very thoughtful framework for what you're trying to tackle, and to think that it started with single use and plastics, and now where it is here, it's you've really done a nice job. While what we want to talk about principally relates to what you're doing with the tour events, can you touch a little bit on the type of work you're doing with the TPC courses?
Yeah, for sure. So real quick, just to back up, there's kind of like 3 areas that I oversee. And one of them, like you mentioned, is our tournaments themselves. Number 2 is we own 11 TPC properties, the flagship being here at TPC Sawgrass, but a number of others across the country. And then we also have our headquarters here in Ponte Vedra, and then have a few other offices across the globe. And so those are kind of my 3 areas: our courses, our tournaments, and our offices, and how we can make them all as sustainable as possible. And to your question specifically about the golf courses, I certainly kind of hinted at it there a little bit as far as promotion of nature. Our courses have long been Audubon International certified, which is all around promotion of wildlife. And we're in the process of working with the Geo Foundation for Sustainable Golf, which I know we'll hit on in a little bit later. But they have a certification for golf courses as well that we're looking towards. But really, for them, it's kind of, again, across those three areas that I said, which is emissions, waste, and water. And with golf courses, especially water, right, is at the forefront of that water use. I don't know if you saw or talked about it in other episodes, but last summer in France, there were serious droughts and some climate protesters, protesting on golf courses that specifically had, at least in their view, extra access to water. So we're thinking about that a lot, but there's a lot of other groups who are also thinking about that. Thankfully, Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, the USGA, the RNA. There's a lot of smart folks thinking about that on how we use less water, how we use less fertilizer, how we use less pesticides, basically total reduction of inputs, which has some monetary benefits, right? Because you're using less, but certainly, from my perspective, helps in the environmental side.
Well, it's interesting. You've got all of the boxes checked. You've been working with Audubon, and now you'll be working with Geo. Is each course required to have their own plan, and are you in the process of setting up baselines? Like, where are you in working with the 11 owned courses?
So we don't, all 11 don't have plans yet, but we're in the process of that. Right now, we're kind of in the, to your point, baselining phase and figuring out where everyone is because they're in different spots. TPC Scottsdale is in a different spot than TPC Boston, and also that's very different than TPC Louisiana. So, kind of just doing the baseline, understanding where we all are, and then kind of taking an individual approach per club. But to your point, we do already have, in 2022 was the first year that we did a baseline for emissions and water and waste for that matter too, related to all 11 clubs.
Brazos, this is one of the reasons I was excited about talking to you, because you're at this early stage with the courses, right? You're really just setting up baselines. This is why I think so much of the important work that you're doing is somewhat under the radar. And I would love for other major courses and course management organizations to be taking that same first step that you are. And that gets to the first of your pillars, which is leadership and influence. You're definitely demonstrating leadership. And I guess as you get those baselines together and you start to produce reports, you'll be in a position to have a large influence on the market.
A few of those 11 host PGA Tour events, but the majority of our host venues are not TBC courses. And so how we can take best practices and share those with all PGA Tour host facilities, I think is something really important. And eventually we're not there in, the next year or so, but eventually I'd love there be a requirement that if you're going to host a PGA Tour event, you have to do so many things that, that are related to sustainability. So that's a little further down the road, but where we're thinking.
Hey now, you're you're serious.
Seriously.
It's hey, if you want to host an event, you need to walk the walk. I think that's great, man. I'd love to see you do it.
Yeah, thanks. I would say a lot of our host facilities are doing more than what people think too, to be honest, and to be fair to them. There's a lot of stuff they're doing that I don't even know yet. So that's kind of the first next step is to really understand what are some of the cool things that our current facilities are already doing.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think collectively all golf industry stakeholders really need to do a better job of promoting what's going on, because there are so many issues. You mentioned that example in France. There are so many misperceptions about the negative impact that golf has on the environment. And I don't think the industry is getting credit for the great work that's being done.
Yeah.
And one of the things we hope to do at Golf Sustainability is really address that. And, the piece about water, for me, it's interesting, right? Because I spent 15 years in corporate sustainability where waste, emissions, and water, energy use is clearly the single biggest factor,
Sure.
right? People are trying to reduce their energy use, convert to renewable energy.
Yeah.
Energy it's an important factor for golf courses, but it's not nearly as important as kind of water use and chemical use.
Right.
And the variability of water as a factor, like you said, between Phoenix and Boston, it's important in both places, but there are very different issues that are being dealt with.
Totally.
Yeah. So let's so thanks for that kind of overview of what's happening on the courses. Let's talk about the tour events, because I know that's where a lot of work's being done, and the Phoenix Open is probably the highest profile event there. So talk us through the work that you're doing to make the actual PGA Tour events more sustainable.
Yeah, sure. So first, to preface, one thing I don't think too many people realize, most of our PGA Tour events are actually owned and operated by a third party. And so it's kind of, I work for the league, if you will. If I was the NBA, I work for the NBA office, and our tournaments are like the teams of the NBA. So there are things that we require of each tournament. This is very similar to like a host facility, like I was just saying. But right now, sustainability requirements aren't there. And so I'm doing a lot of things similar to the golf course side, where I'm trying to understand where all the tournaments are, get a baseline from where they are, and then provide best practices, be able to point them in the right direction, kind of get them started, if you will, or help them go to the next level. But yeah, to some things that are actually happening in our tournaments, we have I say a wide gamut. There is the WM Phoenix Open, which is kind of the the pinnacle of sustainability in sports. It's the world's largest zero waste sporting event, and they've been certified zero waste for 8 years now, which is awesome. And then we have some events who are in smaller markets where it's much harder to even recycle or figure out what to recycle. So we're kind of at the whim of the local markets. So we kind of got the gamut there, and right now I'm just trying to again kind of provide resources and support for our tournaments and help them move the ball forward.
Waste management obviously has a really high profile, and I believe waste management is involved with the PGA Tour on a number of levels. Yeah. Can you kind of talk about how you're working with waste management, both on the Phoenix Open and other initiatives?
Yeah, totally. So as I mentioned, they've been zero waste for 8 years, and they've been working on it for even longer than that. And through all their learnings from the WM Phoenix Open, they created a sustainability consulting arm called the Advisory Services Team. And they help a bunch of other sports organizations, a few other leagues as well, with sustainability. And so in 2022 is when we hired them as our sustainability consultant. And so their team is helping us with the things that we do own and operate. So I mentioned the 11 TPC properties. And as a preface to my last comments on the tournaments, we do own and operate 6 of them. So those 6, I'm really have more direct access, and I'm really working closely with those teams on what that looks like, especially as we ask our other tournaments to do more. So WM is helping us baseline our 11 TPC properties, our 6 owned and operated events, and then also with our offices. And so we have our greenhouse gas emission numbers, our waste and water numbers as well. And they work closely with us in improving all those. They helped us develop our mission statement and our pillar and that sort of thing. And they've been a huge, huge asset to the tour and to me specifically in helping us move this forward, given all their expertise.
Yeah, that's interesting. So while people think of them primarily around the dimension of waste,
hauling,
and recycling, and hauling, it sounds like they're full blown into sustainability advisory, with all dimensions of sustainability.
Yeah, no question. They just on Earth, they had a big announcement. They are doing a similar partnership with the MLB, and they're going to be working to help their clubs kind of in the same way that they're helping us with our tournaments and on the league level as well. And they work with a number of other leagues as well. So they're full
excellent
one-stop shop for sure.
That's great. Yeah. Well, from my past experience in corporate sustainability, I know that sustainability is a team sport and kind of partnerships are important. Tell us about some of the other partnerships that you have that are engaged with you on your initiatives, and it could be suppliers, it could be other associations. Tell us about the whole constellation of stakeholders that you're working with to accomplish your goals.
Yeah, we would need a lot more maybe than one podcast if I went through all of our stakeholders. We have so many, it's immense on the PGA Tour. I feel like I find out new wrinkles. Even myself, been here for 7 years and still find out new wrinkles every once in a while. But in short, it wouldn't be possible. That's why one of our pillars, like I mentioned earlier, is purpose-driven partnerships. But WM is high on the list. Another group that we mentioned earlier, Geo Foundation for Sustainable Golf, is incredibly important to us in being able to move as fast as we have over the last couple of years. They're a Scottish-based nonprofit that is just focused on golf and sustainability, which is kind of crazy. All my colleagues I've gotten to know who oversee sustainability at some of the other leagues, they're pretty jealous that we have a nonprofit within the game of golf that's just focused on sustainability. It's pretty unique, which is great. So worked really closely with them. They've also been super helpful in the creation and positioning of our mission statement and pillars, and making sure what to include, how to talk about it, and that sort of thing. Things to think about, make sure to think about that they've seen, over the 14 years, especially on the golf course side, because that's really what they, originally came about, was just on the golf course side, but then obviously they expanded over the 14 years to include tournaments, and they excuse me, they work with a lot of international golf federations as well. So, and then the last thing that they do, which is super helpful for us, is that certification process that I briefly touched on earlier. It's a lot like LEED certification is for building. GEO has basically come up with a sustainability standards or framework for a golf tournament, and a separate one for golf courses. And there's so many points within the framework, and you have to achieve a certain percentage to become certified. And so it's a great way for us to be able to certify our claims, if you will, have a third party come out and confirm everything that we're doing. So we're not just saying it, we're actually having someone come double check our work, if you will. So that part's super helpful as well.
Yeah, they're an excellent organization. I recently had a conversation with Jonathan Smith, and we're doing an episode with Jonathan, and they're really, when you get to understand the breadth of their activities globally, it's incredible. I mean, they're involved in dozens of countries. And we've also had Frank Lavadera from Audubon on the show, and both very important groups. I think that GEO is probably a little more progressive with the software that they have and the tools that they're providing. And I think their global perspective is very, very interesting. Some of the first episodes that we did on golf sustainability was actually featuring superintendents from European courses, because the pressures around sustainability have been more extreme in Europe, and I think that their practices are somewhat advanced. So really trying to promote and raise the awareness of best practices on a global basis is an important part of what we're trying to do. So those are key partnerships, and all of this aligns with your pillars, which is a sign of good management, Brazos. So congratulations to you on that. When you get to talking about emissions, one of the things we talked about previously is that kind of tournament attendee travel is probably a huge percentage of the footprint related to tournament events. Talk to us a little about that and kind of some of the ways you're thinking about addressing that. And it's obviously not unique to the game of golf. It's unique. It's a factor in all of professional sports. It's a factor in the trade show industry.
It definitely is. It's all live events almost, right? Where people are going around towards. But I mentioned some of my colleagues earlier to other sports and leagues, and should also mention the Green Sports Alliance. When I talk about partners, they've been able to help connect me with them, and we all face a lot of the same issues. I would say as a temporary event, the PGA Tour is even more susceptible to some of that than, like a fixed stadium or arena would be, because it's a little more randomized, and everybody kind of goes to one market, whereas during the NBA season, there's a bunch of games going on across the country at different times. We just have one show every week pretty much. In terms of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, scope 3 is 89% of our emissions factor. A lot of that comes from purchased goods and services, but an even higher amount comes from the fan travel associated every week, which is difficult because, pretty much all of scope 3, right, there's not a lot we can do to solve. It's not in our direct control. We can work to influence, certainly, but, our tournaments don't exist without fans coming to see them. So it's a kind of tough interplay there. So we're thinking about it a lot. The UN Sport for Climate Action Framework, which we aren't officially a signatory of yet, but hopefully we will be soon. But they are constantly thinking about, scope 3 fan travel, and is that incorporated when you make a net zero claim? Is that incorporated or not? Currently, it's not. Anyway, it's something we're working on. Thinking of there's the DP World Tour has done a couple of things with a new partner to allow fans to offset their own travel. Basically, you go in, you click a link, and you calculate your emissions related to your travel, your flight, hotel, rental car, if you have any of that. And it's really not very expensive, especially if you're on a domestic flight. It's really not very expensive. If you live in the market where the PGA Tour event is, your emissions are very low. And just driving there, there's some there, but still. So it's a tough struggle, and we don't have like the perfect answer for it yet, but it's something high on our radar and high on our list.
Yeah, it's this is a fascinating topic, Brazos, and on the corporate side, once again, relating back to my corporate experience, there are so many major corporates that rushed out there to make net zero commitments, and they made these commitments before they even knew what their footprint was and what was going to be involved. And it's a big issue right now in corporate around, hey, we've made these commitments and it's going to be tough to actually make it happen. So I actually advocate for a more measured approach that says, hey, clearly understand what your footprint is, what you're going to need to do to, get to neutral or get to net zero before you make a bold commitment. And what I see some people doing in the trade show industry, which I'm very familiar with, is they'll be carbon neutral for their operations. So it's like everything excluding guest travel, everything excluding attendee travel, everything that they have some direct control over, they're going to get to zero. But and then they're coming up with ideas and ways to mitigate those scope 3 emissions. So it's interesting, and that whole idea of letting people participate. I'm doing a golf trip in Scotland in August, and I had to book a flight on Logan Air. And when I booked my ticket, there was a box I could check that said, you'll pay an additional fee to offset your emissions. So they're allowing people to participate. So if you haven't made any net zero commitments yet, Brazos, tread cautiously, my friend.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's the way I think about it. At this point, we're not an early adopter in making claims, right? So what's the rush now? Now let's make sure we're a little more thoughtful and think about it a little more. So we've just this year gotten our 2023 data, right? So we've got 2 years of emissions, and now I think we're in a good spot to really try to figure out what a reduction by 2030, 2040, 2050 looks like for us, and feel really comfortable in getting there, and hopefully, knock on wood, be able to release something here within the next year or so.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the press release where you announce a net zero goal is something that everyone feels very, very excited about. The release you don't want to put out is when you have to announce that you're resetting your target. Yeah. So it's and it's interesting you mentioned Waste Management, and I'm sure they're involved in this deeply, but recently there were some very large, like Fortune 100 companies that had to walk back waste commitments that they had made to get to zero waste. Sure. And I think in a couple of years you're going to be seeing, or maybe sooner, you're going to be seeing emission reduction commitments being walked back in corporate. So I definitely advise people to tread cautiously. Sure. But I it's really fascinating, and you really should be very proud of yourself. I mean, to think that everything that you're doing right now started 5 years ago, maybe just less than 5 years ago, from commitment to try to reduce single-use plastics at a particular event. It's really pretty cool to see what you're doing. So Keep up the great work.
Thanks for saying that. I feel like we still aren't moving as fast as we can sometimes, but that's just kind of part of the game. We've got a good foundation set. Now we just need to keep building upon it.
I don't think I've ever met a super successful person who ever felt like they were moving fast enough.
Yeah, sure.
So, well, look, kind of that gets to talking about you personally, and I think the material that we've covered so far on the PGA Tour has been fantastic, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you about this, Brazos. I like to give our listeners an opportunity to get to know my guests a little better on a personal basis. And you're clearly a driven person based on what you've talked about. So how would you describe what drives you?
It's a good question. I think I'm a pretty passionate person. So when I kind of find something I'm passionate about, I latch onto it and just kind of go full steam ahead, sometimes to the detriment of, of myself, right? In terms of being a workaholic and that sort of thing. But I'd say specifically around a couple of things around golf and then around climate change in general. Becoming a dad changed a lot of that for me. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and my 5-year-old loves golf. It's like his favorite thing to do. And so now I really feel like the responsibility is on my shoulders to like protect the game, right? And whether he ends up playing another day or not, either way, we still need to protect this climate in this world for him and for my daughter as well, right? So I feel like that's a lot of what drives me now and gets me up every day to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it really is a common thread that runs through many of the people I've talked to on the Golf Sustainability podcast, and people from my 15 years of corporate sustainability experience. And there's this sense of responsibility to do the right thing for your families and for future generations. And it's I find that to be really interesting. Who's been your greatest source of inspiration? Or it could be a number of people. Kind of who inspires you?
I've always loved sports, so I would say certainly some sports stars did growing up. I grew up playing baseball, actually, not golf, and so had a lot of baseball players I looked up to. Now, these days, I'd say it's changed a little bit. I think who I read the most, I'd say, is Ryan Holiday, who I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's got The Daily Stoic, and he's got a number of books that come out. The Obstacle is the Way was kind of his first book, and he's talking about Stoic philosophy and really kind of reviving this centuries-old philosophical school, which has been really cool. Just kind of helps keep me grounded, if you will, good things to kind of go back to and think about. So I love, big plug for Ryan Holiday for sure. If anybody listening hasn't heard of him.
That's great. So you're a Stoic at heart.
Yeah. I guess so. My brother, actually, younger brother, is the one who turned me on to it. And it took me a while to jump in, but now I've kind of dove in head first for sure.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, that calm and centered mindset, I'm sure will serve you well. That's interesting to hear.
Yeah, especially at work and just in life in general, but even more as a parent. Control. The biggest thing about Stoicism is control what you can, and don't stress out about all the stuff you can't control. And with a parent, as a parent, there's only so many things you can't control, as you know. So, and as your daughter will know soon too, just had your first grandchild. Congratulations. So.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, look, being a parent, I wish I had the wisdom that you do when I had 5 and 2-year-old kids. I did not.
I'm not sure I've implemented it all perfect.
Yeah.
But ask my wife in a separate podcast about that. But yeah, anyway, we're trying.
Yeah. My kids will probably tell you they have emotional scars to show for it, but that's really fascinating to hear. Thanks for sharing that. What would you say, Brazos, is the greatest challenge that you've had to face?
Yeah. Honestly, with we're recording this just after Father's Day, so I think the biggest thing for me would be this year in less than a month it'll actually be 10 years since my father passed away, and I'd say that's probably my biggest challenge. Definitely, kind of missed some important milestones of him not being around, getting married, having kids, all these sorts of things. When it would have been great to have him there to fall back on for advice and all that. And just losing a parent in general is tough, kind of no matter what age you are, right? So I'd say that's my biggest thing right now for sure.
Well, look, based on the great work you're doing and based on my personal beliefs, I'm personally confident that your dad's very proud of you, Brazos, and he's not here to tell you personally, but you have to have faith and believe that he knows.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely think he is, but I feel like that's part of what pushes me too. Maybe to your question earlier, just to keep making him proud.
Yeah. All right. Good on you. Well, you've got so much game in front of you, man. I am really excited to see what else you're going to be accomplishing in your role at the PGA Tour as Director of Sustainability, and what I'm sure will be even higher and higher heights and more responsibility for you. So thank you so very much for joining me today on the Golf Sustainability Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you're doing with the Golf Sustainability Podcast. Please keep highlighting the stuff that's going on and pushing this forward in your own way. So thank you.
You are welcome, and I'm excited about going for it here. And to our listeners, thanks very much for joining me on this episode. It's really been a fascinating conversation with Brazos Barber, Director of Sustainability for the PGA Tour. Hopefully, we've done a little bit to kind of lift the veil of secrecy around what's been going on, because it's really great and important work. If you've enjoyed the conversation today with Brazos, please tell your colleagues about it, tell your friends about it, encourage others to subscribe to the podcast, keep listening. We're committed to bringing you many more conversations with industry leaders who are working to help ensure the game for future generations. So thanks for joining me here today. I appreciate you all, and have a good day.